So using that idea here in my numerator, if I were to think of this as being the reorder terms of negative t minus 3, I can remove a negative sign, so my leading coefficient is positive. And when I remove a negative from each term, I'm left with t plus 3. And then in my denominator, again, I can look to factor. More than likely, t plus 3 is going to be a factor. It's not a guarantee, but it's pretty likely. So if I test that, plus 3 and plus 11, they do give me an outer plus inner sum of positive 14t. So those would be my factors. I can then cancel any common factors, and I'm left with my answer, negative 1 divided by the whole quantity, t plus 11. Again, make sure you group your denominator together. And because I canceled a factor that contains a variable from my denominator, I have to exclude that t cannot equal the value that would make this 0, which is negative 3. That exclusion is not apparent in the simplified form, so I include that as a separate and additional domain restriction. So again, when you're looking for these domain restrictions, you're only identifying the additional ones. So it is true that t cannot be negative 11 either. If you were asked what's the domain of this, the domain for this expression would be all real numbers not equal to negative 11 or negative 3. But when you're simplifying it in this form, remember that this restriction here associates with a vertical asymptote, and the one that gets canceled that we're identifying as an additional restriction is just a hole in the graph. You can't tell it's there because you don't see it. You can only tell it's there because you identified it and you worked through and simplified the original problem, and that's why you have to identify it separately.